Hello my awesome friends, it's another adventure. We're going into process domain task 13 and we're jumping straight onto the road. So let's go. Friends, how you doing? It's time to get on the road on 40 days to PMP exam success, and today we are on to day 27. On day 27 we're going to be talking about determine appropriate project methodology, methods, and practices. This is process and task 13. Process domain task 13. So we've got a lot to talk about. Let's jump on the road and let's begin. So if I was going to retitle this, I would title it page 14 Agile Practice Guide, page 18 Agile Practice Guide, page 19. That's what I would title it. And you might wonder, why would I title it that? Because those pages give a really nice idea of everything that we're going to be talking about today. So it starts off with an understanding of what this task really wants you to know. What does this task want you to know? It wants you to know that not every project can be predictive. Not every project should be predictive. Not every project should be agile. You might find instances where you may need to lean a little bit more to the world of agile than predictive, or the world of predictive than agile, but you could be in a hybrid happy medium, to be honest. And that is really what this is talking about. Okay, so it starts off saying determine the appropriate methodology for the project, or maybe it's a group of methods for the project, or maybe it's some practices as well. Whatever the combination, you need to determine what that will look like. Now the first enabler says assess project needs, assess project complexity, and assess the project magnitude. So three things: the needs, how complex it is, and how big, the breadth of the project. Once you determine things like this, you identify that your project needs an incremental approach, because the stakeholders, they want whatever you're developing as soon as possible. Maybe their business depends on it, right? What about complexity? Maybe the project you're working on has very little direction as far as the requirements and the technicality. In other words, you are so far from agreement in terms of the technicality to run the project, and you're also far from agreement in terms of the requirements for the project. You know you need to work on something, but what you need to work on is not as secure and firmed up. So it is in the complex space. And then the magnitude, if you're working on something that is enormous, really far-reaching, impacting a lot of lives, then your disposition might be to be a little bit more predictive. See where that's going? The second enabler says recommend project execution strategy, for example, finance and contracting. Now this is just saying determine how you will fund a project, determine how the solution of the project will be delivered. Is there going to be contracting involved? If so, what does that look like? And thoughts such as that. The next enabler says recommend a project methodology. Watch this. Or approach. Now the word methodology, it's very finite. When we say methodology, we've got all of these practices and approaches that are meant to be done together in a more procedural way. But when we say approach, it could mean a framework as well. It could mean a collection of just various practices. So it could be a rather custom solution to managing the project. Okay? So it says recommend a project methodology or approach that is predictive, agile, hybrid. You as the project manager, you need to be able to recommend what to do, based on your knowledge, based on your experience. What do you recommend? That is the question. See? So sometimes it takes having a fair amount of experience to know whether an agile approach would do better. Case in point, the virtual case file project is a good example of how the FBI tried to use a predictive method to work this project. They failed. It was not until they used an agile approach that they were able to succeed. So hundreds and millions of taxpayer dollars later, they discovered, oh, we should probably be using a more agile approach, and that's how they succeeded. All right, and the next one says use iterative incremental practices throughout the project lifecycle. That is lessons learned, stakeholder engagement, and risk. So all they're saying is, where possible, where necessary, deliver incrementally, but plan in iterations. That's all it's saying. All right, so you can plan in iterations, you can execute in iterations, and you can deliver in increments. Because you do know, if you take a look at page 18 and 19 in the Agile Practice Guide, what you're going to realize really quick is that an iterative approach does not necessarily mean that you are delivering in increments. You do know that there is a difference between iterative and incremental. Iterative means you are repeating things until they are correct. It does not necessarily mean that you are delivering in pieces. You see, iterative means you are repeating until correct and you are delivering one time. That's an iterative life cycle. An incremental life cycle means you are delivering multiple times. So you do need to know these definitions really well for your exam. Okay, if you're not familiar with them, I would recommend that you do get familiar with them. Okay, incremental is a single delivery. Incremental is a multiple delivery, frequent smaller deliveries, and iterative is a one-time delivery. Okay, iterative one-time delivery, incremental frequent smaller deliveries. So you need to be able to distinguish between these two. Now, on top of that, when we talk about the aspect of doing things in iterations, we could talk about lessons learned being done at the end of every iteration. We call that a retrospective in the world of Agile, right? So where possible, break down your lessons learned into iterations. Where possible, address stakeholder engagement in iterations, different stakeholders for different iterations, different levels of engagement for different iterations, and that's how you need to also approach the topic of risk. So approach the topic of risk in iterations as well. Processing the information in chunks, not all at once. See? And that's the general idea. Doing things in iterations and also delivering in increments. So they are encouraging you to use iterative and incremental practices throughout the project. Okay? Wherever you find the opportunity. Doing things in increments helps you to deal with complexity. It is also a risk coping mechanism. Doing things in bite-sized chunks. It's common sense. The saying goes, how do you eat an elephant? It's a bite at a time. How do you address a big, hairy, audacious goal? A bite at a time. How do you address complexity? A bite at a time. Okay? So that's the general mindset. I just want to stress one more time, really take a look at page 14 in the Agile Practice Guide for the Stacy complexity model. Remember, you've got the simple zone where you do predictive type projects. You got the complex zone where you're tending a little bit towards agile some more. And you also have somewhere in the middle, you got the complicated zone where a hybrid mindset is not a bad one to have. But just be aware that complicated does not mean the same as complex. Excuse me. Complicated could mean there are many moving parts. Excuse me. And there's a lot of intricacy. My voice is gone. But complex just means the end goal is not as clear. Okay? Got a coughing bout for a few seconds, excuse that. But when you take a look at the Stacy model, really apply yourself to understand the difference between complicated, many moving parts, many steps, a lot of intricacy, versus complex, which could mean no clarity or not enough clarity about where you're going. Not enough clarity regarding maybe the vision, maybe the ultimate destination. See, that's what makes things complex. When the requirements are not clearly understood, and when the technicality, how you're going to do what you want to do, is not very well understood. Okay? I hope you found this to be useful. Remember, I'm going to be sharing some open-ended questions. Not as many as previous days where I had 80, 70, 100, not as many. But I would encourage you to try to answer all those open-ended questions, because not only is it going to make you a well-rounded PM that understands the vocabulary of project management, it's also going to help you to fluidly tackle those exam questions. And to be perfectly honest, my friends, you do know this is the express version. Those open-ended questions I'm referring to does take time to put together. Also, we have the multiple choice questions that I normally deliver. So I do want you to know I will get those going on the Praizion channel, but for now, these videos that are just the content without the open-ended questions are going to be on my personal channel. All right, so don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Share with your friends if you know of anyone getting ready for the exam that has a bottleneck. And remember that we have a plethora of content in other places. So if you are getting ready for this exam and you don't have a coach, you don't have a trainer, you don't have a mentor, someone who is shepherding you through the process, you need to go on down to hpmexam.com, because that's your one-stop shop to get a boatload of stuff. hpmexam.com, you can sign up for a half-day bootcamp. You can get our 600-page book, 200-page handout, just tons and tons of stuff that you see on the screen. All right, so go on down there, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.